Hello, everybody. Today is the 23rd of August, a Sunday morning in California, from which this recording comes to you. My dear friend and colleague, founding member of this channel, he is in Santiago, Chile. And he's coming to you from there. And the reason we are here is because we have information that we wish to share with you that is very significant in reaction to the maximum pressure that Scott Bessent claims he's going to apply on Iran and what Iran is going to do about that. If you like what we do, please hit the like and subscribe button. Go to our Substack channel, become a paid member so we deliver this inside your mailbox. And with that introduction, Vijay, the floor is yours. Please say what you need to say to inform our audiences as to what is going to happen with the maximum pressure campaign.
Yeah, let's start with the nuclear question because just a few days ago, former US Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene made a social media post where she said that she had been in meetings before she left the US Congress. She had been in meetings where US government officials had been openly speculating about using a nuclear device against the Iranians because it has now become very clear that the US military campaign against Iran is basically stuck. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has resigned from Congress, said that she had been in meetings. She said it's pure evil, that these are her words, that the United States is actually considering using a nuclear weapon against Iran. Now, it's also got to be made very clear that the United States has previously used nuclear weapons against Japan twice in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, them saying this, even in private, should not be taken lightly. It is very clear that countries that have a nuclear shield, let's take the two examples of North Korea and Libya. Libya was developing a nuclear weapon through a program where it was coordinating with countries such as Pakistan and others. Then Muammar Gaddafi decided to give up the nuclear shield. So, having given up the nuclear shield in the early 2000s, well, when the time came, NATO, led by the United States and France, launched an attack on Libya and destroyed the country, killed Muammar Gaddafi. Meanwhile, around the same time, the People's Democratic Republic of Korea or North Korea tested a nuclear weapon and then openly declared that it was a nuclear weapon state. Well, since then, it has not been attacked or it has not faced the kind of pressure campaign that it might have faced. It could very well have faced. In recent weeks, Donald Trump has actually withdrawn from a military exercise with the South Koreans, saying that he wants to open a negotiation once again with the North. They treat the North as an equal partner. Well, now comes the question of Iran. Iran, we know, doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. The United States has accused it of having a program. It doesn't have it. International Atomic Energy Agency has verified on several occasions that it doesn't see evidence of a nuclear weapons program. The uranium stockpile that's there is at 60% enrichment. That itself is not sufficient for a nuclear weapon. They very clearly have said, look, they are interested in nuclear energy, not a nuclear weapon, and also nuclear medicine. This is actually a very important part of modern medicine. You're enriching also for nuclear medicine, and so they have made it very clear that's what they're saying. Now, put Marjorie Taylor Greene's point across, whether she's correct or not. Let's just say that for the purpose of our conversation, that she's right. The United States is threatening to use a nuclear weapon against Iran. The United States is threatening to escalate further against Iran. Well, what shield does Iran have? Iran doesn't have a nuclear shield, a nuclear weapons shield. So there is a very clear conversation taking place inside Iran, in Tehran, amongst people in the know, to raise the level of enrichment from 60% to 90%. There's a very clear conversation. Why wouldn't you do that as a shield? You may not ever want to use a nuclear weapon, but you want to have it as a shield. Why wouldn't you enrich to 90% enrichment? You would do that to protect yourself. It's a shield. It's not a weapon as such. And then why wouldn't Iran walk out of the International Atomic Energy Agency, disabuse itself of the Non-Proliferation Treaty? After all, Israel, a close US ally, is not a member of the International Atomic Energy Agency, doesn't participate in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, has an illegal nuclear weapon. So why should Iran not cross the red line of 90% if it would protect the Iranian people? There are 440 kilograms of weapons grade enrichment possible. They could go from 60% to 90%. It's not a, they don't have a, let's say, they don't have a scientific barrier. They know how to do it. They don't have a technological barrier. They can do it. It's a political question. Do they want to do this? They are already in the middle of a war with the United States. Do they want to provoke further action? I don't see why not logically. Iran, I think, has calculated very well. We are now at the end of October. Let's do a little counting here. September, October. And then what happens in early November? United States has a midterm election. It is more than likely, especially given the fact that United States has decided to start a war, a tariff war with Canada. It's more than likely that the economic condition is not going to improve. So Mr. Trump's political party, the Republican Party, is going to be damaged in the midterm election. Will this weaken Mr. Trump? You can go both ways with that calculation. It could, on the one hand, weaken him, it could embolden him. He's, after all, the president. He can say, I don't care what Congress says, we're going to drop a nuclear weapon. Whatever it is, Iran is preparing for the long haul. It's preparing for a long battle. I recently reported on the question of the Iraqi resistance forces. They have till 30th of September to effectively hand in their weapons and wrap themselves into the Iraqi military. They are saying, the various resistance forces in Iraq, the militias, they are saying, look, we are not going to do that unless the United States leaves Iraq. They have put their foot down, said the 30th September deadline is a deadline for the US to withdraw from Iraq. The question of handover of weapons will happen after that. They don't want to hand over their weapons. As long as they keep their weapons, US positions within Iraq are threatened. Remember, I said earlier, the whistle for the Iraqi resistance hasn't been blown. They haven't started attacking US positions at all. They are holding back. So Iran has a number of points of escalation. The Iraqi resistance forces can attack US bases in Iraq. They can move from 60% enrichment to 90% enrichment. They can endure this war, and we'll talk about that in a minute because of the economic opportunities afforded through Pakistan and so on. They likely could endure this conflict with suffering from the people. There is no war without suffering from the people, but it appears the people, a large number of them, are willing to hold out if this means no surrender. So, in that sense, Iran has space until November, sufficient space until November. And if around November Iran declares itself a nuclear weapons power, well, then the whole situation changes. Because then, Iran, if it had any kind of weapon, nuclear weapon, would be able to directly threaten very close US allies, which, the United States would have to then back off, just as they backed off from North Korea. So I think on the question of the nuclear front, I wouldn't say that Iran is doing this because it wants to. It's made, I think, a calculation. Given that the United States is capable of using nuclear weapons, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's not entirely reliable all the time, But let's say that she's 50% correct in her statement. She said, I heard people saying this. Even if she's 50% correct, it's likely United States would go in that direction if desperate. So the Iranians are calculating. I don't think they want to go nuclear, but they may decide it's the strategically smart thing to do is to go to 90% enrichment, perhaps test a weapon, perhaps have an arsenal ready, perhaps then make it very clear to the United States that if you try anything further, if you don't come in and negotiate for peace, then one of your close allies will face a threat, just as North Korea is able to threaten Seoul just across the border. There are lots of US allies just across the water for Iran. So I think Iran is, in fact, in a pretty strong position right now. It's not in a weak position politically, it has these options. But I think it's important for us to talk a little about its economic viability, and then the changes taking place in with the Gulf Arab states. But I think initial point has to be that this 90% enrichment is on the table, that the idea of building a nuclear shield is on the table. I think the Iranians have been driven to it by US policy. I don't think this is something that is a preferred option for them, but it's certainly an option to protect 100 million people and to protect their way of life.
Well, thank you for the summation, Vijay, and that is a very good summation in terms of how the logic works. And I wish to share with our global audience. I have shared this with you previously. We have insight into some very privileged places inside Iran, and based on that, we reported to you, and we are now reporting for the first time to the global audience that we have. Uh, I believe the only ones to report that we are aware of a decision made by the supreme leader Mustafa Khamenei. We are aware of the decision, which is that Mustafa Khamenei has given a green signal, an okay, to his nuclear engineers, to his nuclear team, that they can and must proceed to enrich the uranium to 90%. Now, that does not mean that he has said that go and detonate a nuclear device. That would be the next step. But they have now made that decision, which was very, very difficult for them to make. As you just explained, they did not want to go that route, but due to the stupid, completely uh, baseless policies pursued by Trump and his allies, accusing Iran of developing nuclear weapons, they have now pushed Iran to having that card in their hand, so that if push comes to shove, they already have a nuclear grade uranium stockpile of 440 kilograms at 90% enrichment. That's a very significant escalation on their part, but forced upon them by the absolute stupidity of Trump and whoever advises him. And in terms of the information that you talk about, it's not only Marjorie Taylor Greene. We reported on this channel that even as recently as about a week ago, when Trump was meeting with his close allies, cabinet members in Camp David, he floated the idea of using nuclear bombs, nuclear devices on Iran. And then Dan Kane, the chief, Joint Chiefs, said, Chairman, that no, 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 stop, stop, stop. We're not going to go there. So he has been toying with this idea simply because he does not feel that anything that hurts him, is off the table. It doesn't hurt him in his stupid mind. So other things as well that we wish to report on this channel. I mean, we discussed with you, Vijay, that instead of getting Pakistan away from Iran, Trump has pushed Pakistan in closer to Iran. Monday, Asim Munir, the most important person in Pakistan in terms of military decisions, in terms of civilian decisions, is going to be in Iran with a 12-point agenda, meeting with everybody. everybody except the supreme leader. But the supreme leader will be represented by several people, including President Prezeshkian, Mohsen Rezai, his military chief, IRGC chief Vahidi, and others. So Pakistan is not being pushed away. Pakistan is actually being pushed in the direction of Iran. Very, very big, extraordinarily sensitive decision by Pakistani government, based upon information that we have, facilitated by China and Russia. So go ahead, Vijay. Lots for you to comment on.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I think people may not know this, but Pakistan China trade is enormous, and it's growing all the time, whereas US Pakistan trade has declined. And so this is an important thing to pay attention to. The second thing that's important is, again, people may not realize this, but Pakistan has a very long border with Iran, and the cross border trade is at the level of something like 3 billion US dollars. Both sides had, previous to this illegal war of aggression, said that they want to triple that amount from 3 billion to near 10 billion. I think it's quite possible that the trade increase, and it's a pretty good trade. It's bilateral, it's pretty good. And once the Pakistani side completes the pipeline to bring natural gas into Pakistan, the trade is going to increase tenfold, I think, even more. The Iranians have already built their side of the pipeline. It's now down to the Pakistani side to be built. And we're going to see, we're going to move from rice, maize, nuts, and so on to natural gas and finished goods. I mean, the trade is going to go up the value chain. Right now, it's really on primary commodities, foodstuffs, and all of that. Very important trade in foodstuffs. But the trade will increase. And so when you have Pakistan, regardless of its historical relationship with the United States, which, by the way, is an up and down relationship, because when the US needs Pakistan, Pakistan is a close ally, such as during the war in Afghanistan. The moment they decide, well, the war is over, as they first did when the Mujahideen prevailed in Afghanistan, then the United States withdrew, and then they came back after 9/11, and then they again withdrew. So the United States is a fair weather friend for Pakistan, but its neighbors, Iran and China, are not fair weather friends. They've been involved with Pakistan for a long time. And so what you're seeing is, I think you're seeing people in Islamabad, in Pakistan, make an assessment that their relationship with Iran and with China is actually very important and is a long term relationship. Unlike the relationship with the United States, which goes up and down. When the US needs Pakistan, they need it. When they don't need it, they withdraw. Tariq Ali, in his book, Pakistan on the flight path of US power, puts it very well. Talks to military generals. They say when they are done with us, they just throw us away. They withdraw the funding, etc., etc. And that's coming from the standpoint of the military, one of the most important institutions in Pakistan. He quotes senior generals talking in that way. So when you look at the situation now with China, to some extent Russia, but certainly with Iran, the trade, I'm setting aside the diplomatic question and all of that, the trade is actually very meaningful. Pakistan is an energy dependent country. If that pipeline were completed, running from the South Fars field into Pakistan, your price of natural gas will drop immediately. The issue of having to import via shipping and so on will go, because then you have a pipeline running in. This pipeline could very well eventually go to India. It could go up into China. It could go to Afghanistan. I mean, there's enormous potential for trade in that region. Why am I sitting on trade for a moment? But because it's these land corridors that are helping Iran at this time of crisis. There are also land corridors from Iraq that are open and supplying the Iranian people with goods, both from Iraq and in Pakistan. Iran is being supplied during this war when their economy is in some distress. And I think, and we know that China and Russia have made a signal decision that this war in Iran is fundamentally important to their general orientation that they are building. They just cannot afford to see Iran be defeated in this conflict. Iran is infinitely more significant for them than Syria was. Syria was not so significant for China and Russia. It wasn't a hinge country. Iran is actually a very important country for the Belt and Road project. Iran is very important as far as Russia is concerned for military and political reasons. So, in that sense, they want to defend, Iran as much as possible without coming out and doing anything. See, they don't want to start a multi-front war with the United States, but they don't want to see Iran be defeated. That means that Pakistan is getting support from China and Russia to help economically sustain the Iranians through this period, and that gives the Iranians, you might say, a much longer strategic vision of how they can outlast the United States in this war, because they just cannot be suffocated in this war. They are getting supplied from outside. The US cannot stop Pakistan from some sending in goods. Well, wait a minute. The US could start sanctioning Pakistan. But here's the problem with sanctioning Pakistan. And I think this, as I mentioned last time, this is already within their knowledge bank. They know that when countries stop using the dollar, it becomes hard to sanction the country. They also know, because I've spoken to people in the US Treasury Department, they know that when a country is put under immense sanctions pressure, it turns away and starts to build trade relations elsewhere. Canada's Mark Carney has already said, after the US said, look, we're going to do tariffs 50% on XYZ, he said, well, we're looking for other markets. What he means is China, principally. He's going to buy farm equipment from China, not from the United States. They want to also punish US farmers. Those are states which Trump will need to win in November. And if US farmers see their livelihoods deteriorate, they may go elsewhere with their votes, or they may sit at home. So, just as Mark Carney has already said, look, I'm going elsewhere to do my trade. If you sanction Pakistan right now and sanction it pretty hard, Pakistan in an economically fragile situation, it's going to pivot away from the Western economic system and enter more deeply into the Chinese system, in which it's already very integrated. When I travel to Chinese universities, I always see, 100 Pakistani students speaking Chinese, studying there, learning engineering and so on, to go back to Pakistan so they can work for Chinese firms. That's what they always say. मैं यहाँ आया हूँ, वहाँ जाके I'll work for a Chinese company. That's why they are learning Chinese. I asked them, why you come here learning Chinese and so on. No, we need to learn Chinese. We're going to work for. I'm looking forward to the day when they build Pakistani firms and don't just work for Chinese firms. That's a different situation. But let's not get into that now. The point is, you sanction a country, the country is going to pivot away and end up building relations with others. So this is an enormous risk that the United States will have to face. That if they sanction Pakistan as a consequence of the increased trade with Iran during this wartime, in order to basically stop trade into Iran and suffocate the Iranian people into surrendering, if they start sanctioning Pakistan, Pakistan will pivot further towards Russia and China, which it's already got very close relations with. And so then the United States will end up losing a country with which it has actually pretty good relations. I mean, let's be clear that the Pakistani leadership is close to the Iranian leadership. But this leadership doesn't have a problem with the United States per se. They have very close relations with the US as well. Even the prime minister, the the head of the army, they have very fraternal relations with the Trump administration. They don't have any problem. But if the US puts pressure on them, they'll break from the United States. That's not going to be good. I mean, then also it's not good for South Asia. Just to put this on the table, as a last point I want to make is, if Pakistan breaks with the United States and goes fundamentally into much closer ties with China and Russia, this is not great for India-Pakistan relations. Which I think you and I want to see improve. This is not great for India-Pakistan relations, because then the Indians will see Pakistan as basically a proxy of China, which I think is a very poor reading of the situation. I hope that's not how Delhi will see this, but Delhi will see this as a threat, and I think that to me is a problem. So I'm hoping that the United States doesn't impose enormous sanctions on Pakistan. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm hoping that there is no, creation of this alternative bloc that increases confrontation, because what we want to see from this Pakistani government is, in fact, helping to reduce confrontation in Asia. We want them to be able to pressure the United States through the trade, to back off from Iran, and indeed to back off from West Asia and South Asia. That's the preferred path, not to increase bloc confrontation. We don't want to see that happen, because that's a very ugly future for the region. We don't want to see more bloc confrontation between India and Pakistan. We want to see confrontation die down, people's needs, peace and development increase, and so on. So, yeah, Pakistan is providing an enormous economic lifeline to Iran. United States does have the mechanism to sanction Pakistan. If the US does that, it will move Pakistan closer to China and Russia. That really isn't the best thing for South Asian relations, but it may be what happens in the near future.
Again, excellent summation by yourself, Vijay, on what is going on. And to add to what you just said, I have to again rely upon information that I get, intelligence actually, privileged, because it is not shared by the sources with other people. I'm aware of the fact that Pakistan, Russia, and China,
Mm.
critical three countries, have consulted with each other over the last 2 days since Bessent started making his stupid noises. I mean, those are the most stupid noises that Bessent could have made. He has made many, but most recently, he made the noise that maximum pressure, something that has never been seen. We are going to apply that right now. And even though he talked about sanctioning Pakistan. He actually did not announce any such thing, but Pakistan got the hint.
Mhm.
And Russia and China have consulted with Pakistan at the highest level, at the foreign minister level. Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Isagdar. And this is where this information comes from. I'm happy to report that because I'm allowed to do so. Very privileged information. So they have actually been pushed towards each other. I just mentioned this earlier a little bit. Uh, Pakistan has decided to send Asim Munir. He's traveling to Iran on Monday. He's going to meet with everybody. He's going to meet with all the military leadership, all the civilian leadership, President Pezeshkian, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Arakchi, and Mohsin Rezai, the military is secretary, and everybody who is going to make decisions on behalf of Iran. And there is going to be closer cooperation. Now, to add another element of concern, actually, but in favor of Pakistan, favor of Iran, is that for some reason, I would say stupid reason that makes no sense to me, UAE has decided to go into the camp of the Zionist Israel and with the United States, and they have made an alliance of two. Not India in that yet, but maybe India is going to join, which is going to make it worse. And they have decided to terminate uh, trading relationships, merchant relationships with Iran going back, in some cases, hundreds of years, because these Iranians have been trading with Dubai for hundreds of years, families. I know many of them. So, for reasons again that defy logic, MBZ has decided that he's going to terminate all of that. Now, not all of them are going to get terminated, because many of them are just personal, and they are going to go underground. But Iran, as a country, has decided that that trade will be routed via Pakistan, and Pakistan is very happy to take that trade, obviously. So, uh, even though you and I, as analysts and thinkers in our own right, with all the humility, keep on saying that these countries have to work with each other, these countries have to stay together, blah blah blah. U.S. has to get out because U.S. is not situated in the region. U.S. has no good intentions in the region, but U.S. keeps on doing stupid things. US keeps on doing indefensible things, things that make no sense at all, Vijay. Trump has tried the maximum military pressure. What did that achieve? All the bases have been destroyed. They are not usable anymore. Abraham Lincoln, the huge carrier, was not able to go back to his port because the port did not exist. So sailors were there for almost a year. Moldy showers, food that did not that was not eatable, and so forth. And no military success to speak of. So that campaign stopped. Now the maximum pressure campaign starts. What is that going to achieve? Pakistan, instead of being pushed away, has been pushed forward, closer to Iran. And I can say this confidently, because it is something that comes to me from a very close, reliable source. Russia and China have decided to support Pakistan, and they have decided to keep Iran viable. Iran has made a decision; it's going to survive through November. Another piece of news I would like to break on this channel: Pezeshkian, president of Iran, has announced. This is something that has been announced. I don't know whether it's known yet in the West, that a survey team will go out, survey all the damage that has happened in Iran by the United States, and start compensating the Iranian people for that damage. Start building their homes. Start getting their life back on track. Blah blah blah. I mean, huge movement in support of the people of Iran, and the people of Iran are obviously solidly behind this. So my question to you, Vijay: how does this end when you have a stupid guy who is the president of the United States? Very stupid.
Let me come back to the United Arab Emirates, because I think this is a very important issue. You started quite correctly by saying there's a very, very old relationship between Iran and the various emirates that dot the coastline of the Arabian Peninsula. There is, people may not know, a very large Iranian population that lives in the United Arab Emirates, particularly in Dubai. Large population. These are they go back hundreds of years. These are trader
Yes,
families that have lived in the souks, in the bazaars of the various emirates, particularly in Dubai. You
yes,
can see them in large numbers. There's a community there. They play a role in Dubai's national life, and they have been trading across the waters for hundreds of years. In fact, relations between Dubai, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, Dubai is the most important of them, and Iran have improved. In 2019, there were discussions about security questions between Iran and the UAE. In 2022, Iran and the UAE restored ambassador level connections, high level contacts, and so on. Abu Dhabi, in fact, another one of the Emirates, was very much opposed to joining with the United States in this campaign. One of the reasons is that they didn't want UAE's ports, its financial centers, its oil installations, and so on. They didn't want them, targets for retaliation. So in a sense, the UAE was moving in the direction of pragmatic correlation. That was the movement of the UAE. It's pretty interesting. On 19th of August, just a few days ago, the United Arab Emirates in total suspended all trade. Now, I say suspended all trade. It's about $30 billion a year. It's not a small amount of trade. The UAE was Iran's second largest trading partner. As you said, the UAE was the hinge. It was the place for re-exports. Iranian goods would go to the UAE, would get repackaged and exported out to the rest of the world to evade sanctions. And the bazaars, the souks of the UAE were actually held up. They were maintained by some of this re-export trade, and these merchants are going to be hit hard in the country. This is non-oil trade, by the way. This 30 billion was non-oil trade, so it doesn't include the oil amount. And I don't know what compensation the bazaris are going to get for the trade that they are going to lose. So this is important. But they have fallen prey effectively to the US economic strategy. That's what they have fallen prey to. And it's too bad, because there had been a move, particularly from Abu Dhabi. That emirate had played a public role in trying to suggest that there should be space for mediation, de-escalation, and so on. High officials from Abu Dhabi were making these statements, but apparently, Dubai is the largest of the lot, and it got its way in the end. And so the UAE has decided to break with Iran quite decisively, opening itself up to now retaliation. That's the other side of it. When you behave like this, you're going to face two problems. One is you suddenly lose economic activity, and then you're open to retaliation when it's the middle of a war. United States is not going to get hit by Iran. Iranian missiles can't reach New York, but they can destroy, Abu Dhabi's financial center, or Dubai's ports, and so on. Dubai's ports, which have actually been built by Indian capital, by Western capital, and so on, can be badly damaged. And I don't know who would ensure the rebuilding of the port if this de-escalation and mediation doesn't go forward. Okay, having said that, your question is, well, how does this end? How can it end when neighboring countries like the United Arab Emirates go in this direction? They are merely prolonging the conflict. You see, if everybody in the region, Iraq, the Gulf Coordination Council, the GCC, Saudi Arabia, if all these countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Russia, China, if all these countries said, look, this war has got to end, the United States just cannot continue pursuing the war. But every time you have a country like the UAE go in this direction, it gives the US confidence that if the UAE moves in this direction, maybe they can convince Qatar or Kuwait and then Saudi Arabia, and then we're back on the track of permanent conflict against Iran. Just when the conflict was, as I say, coming down. Remember, 2022, that's only 4 years ago, UAE and Iran exchanged ambassadors. They were going in a really good direction. Now we're back again to a direction of confrontation in the middle of a war. Very ugly scenario. How does this end? Well, the fact of the matter is, and I'm bringing us back to the beginning of this conversation, I think a lot of people are looking at the midterm elections in the US because, without a doubt, this is Mr. Trump's war. I don't think this is a war of the entire US establishment. I just don't feel like they see this as a necessary war. So, number one, I think the Iranians have the capacity to wait till November. They have normal trade taking place through Pakistan, through Iraq. There's Chinese trade, etc. They are getting resupplied. There are credit lines open to them, and so on. So I don't think right now the Iranians are in an economic condition for surrender. I think they can wait the United States out. The United States and the UAE have just opened new targets for Iran. In case the US comes in with a big battering, the Iranians can strike the United Arab Emirates. Now, that's a very serious issue because the UAE is become the hinge of the entire Gulf Arab world. I mean, it's not only the trading hinge, it's the transport hub. Emirates, the Dubai airport is really the transport hub of the Middle East. And if the Iranians decide to shut that down, that would be very, very serious consequences for world travel. Yeah, because people going from Asia to Africa, or Asia to Europe, or Asia to North America, you're flying through Dubai. You're flying either through Dubai or you're flying through Doha. Those are the two hinge points. Of course, also Istanbul. But, if these two airports are shut down again, it's a very serious consequence for global trade. So Iran can very well do that. But finally, and here's coming back right to the front, if Iran does move to 90% enrichment, and if it does test a nuclear device, detonates a nuclear device, and says, look, here we are. Okay, you didn't want us to do this. We didn't want to do this. We told you we didn't want to do this. But you, by going after us in this way, have really forced us to test a nuclear device, and then the war ends. That's the end of the war. Because then the United States will not want to test the resolve of the Iranians. Because, if Iran sends one mid level nuclear weapon toward Israel and Israel retaliates, we're in the middle of a different kind of war. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants a major nuclear exchange taking place in West Asia. So I think one way that this war ends is November 4th, or whenever it is, Trump gets really defeated in the midterm elections. And then a new kind of resolve in Congress comes in to put a lot of pressure on Mr. Trump. And in fact, that pressure will start building. The editor of Stars and Stripes newspaper was fired recently. So was a journalist who wrote the story on the USS Abraham Lincoln and the bad conditions on the ship and the fact that sailors were disgruntled. Having written that story, being told not to publish it, they decided to publish it, they were fired. So there will be rumblings inside the military, there will be rumblings from the congressional Democrats and so on. Let's see if that is sufficient to stop the conflict. If not, and if the Iranians move in the direction of 90% enrichment and testing a nuclear weapon, well, then it's game over. Then we have a North Korea scenario in West Asia. Then the whole thing is on reset. They'll have to rethink what happens next. So Zulfikar, if you ask me now, well, how is this going to end? It ends in two ways. Trump is weakened, it ends. Already Netanyahu seems weakened. Israel has disappeared from this war, by the way. It was an initiator in the war. It has largely disappeared. I think they realized we can't win. They've vanished. They're not even there in talks about de escalation. They have vanished from the front of this conflict. This is Trump's war. He doesn't want to be a loser. If there's pressure from the United States, it could end that way. If it doesn't end that way, Iran enriches to 90%, tests a weapon, and then says, here we are. And it definitely ends then, unless we've really gone into the realm of madness.
Well, I tend to agree with you, Vijay, but I would like to add one additional point of intelligence information that I am happy to report to yourself and to our audience. Uh, I believe just last night for the US, for me, but in the morning, Sunday morning for Tehran, they have made a decision. The government has made a decision that any country that joins up with Scott Bessent, the United States, in enforcing these additional sanctions, Iran will consider that to be an enemy of Iran. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable position to take. I mean, let's just recognize that Iran is a victim of a war of aggression. It did not start this war. It's a victim of a war of aggression. I was very much surprised to see a letter published in the Guardian newspaper in the UK, written to Iranian political prisoners, with signatories among some of the most important voices of the US left wing intelligentsia signing a letter like that, calling, saying there are two scissors here at work, the scissor of US imperialism and then the scissor of the Islamic Republic. I mean, it's stunning that in the middle of a war of aggression against the United States, that somebody would pen a letter like that. I mean, at this moment, there are no two options. You have to stand with people who are a victim of an illegal war of aggression. It's a war crime. There was no reason to attack Iran. It's a war crime. That's it. That's where we are. This war crime must be ended, and people should be brought to justice. The reason why Marco Rubio and his team have sanctioned, senior members of the International Criminal Court is because they understand that, in fact, they are liable to serious accusations of war crimes. The entire Trump administration is liable. I mean, at Nuremberg and in Tokyo, people who started the war of aggression, the Nazis and the Japanese imperialists, were found guilty of wars of aggression, and then they were hung. They were killed. It was a death penalty. So, if we are honest that Mr. Trump, we know, has started a war of aggression. George W. Bush started a war of aggression against Iraq. If we follow the Nuremberg and Tokyo trial standards, they should be executed for their crime. An international tribunal should find them guilty of a war crime. Now, I'm not in favor of the death penalty, but they should sit in prison and reflect, and perhaps, since they both claim to be Christians, let them read the Bible over and over again and reflect on the complexity of the moral frame that they are utilizing to understand the war in Iran. So yeah, this is a very difficult period, and we have to be clear about what's happening here. So if Iran tomorrow decides to go to 90% enrichment and then test a nuclear weapon, this does not at all retroactively validate the US argument that Iran might have a nuclear weapon, because they were not intending to do it. The only reason they're doing it is because of a war of aggression against them. So it got to be very clear that if they do tests, Trump is going to say, look, I told you they're looking for a nuclear weapon. That is, in fact, looking at history upside down.
Well, with that, even though we could go on for another hour, Vijay, thank you so much. With that, we need to end this extraordinary conversation because it enlightens. It puts into perspective what is going on. It explains the absolute stupidity of Trump and Bessent in further escalation and pushing Iran and Pakistan, China and Russia further closer together against the United States interest and greater resilience to this pressure. So thank you so much for your excellent commentary, enlightening all of us. Appreciated greatly that you made time on a Sunday. We shall see you again at our regular time on Thursday. Everybody who has become a member of this channel, please hit the like and subscribe button. Go to Substack, become a paid member, so we will deliver this great intel inside your mailbox. And we shall see you again very soon. Thank you very much. Any final words, Vijay?
No, no, I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation. Our conversation is really an endless one. Each of them is related to the other.
Thank you so much, Vijay. And it is a delight to have you. And I always feel greatly enlightened every time I speak to you. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thanks.